Like everything, using popular texts and using situation comedies in particular offers possibilities, affords us some benefits, but also presents challenges, right? There's no magic bullet in teaching in any sense, right? There are always pros and cons. And so some of the benefits, as I just explained, are that these kinds of texts are engaging and they're multimodal. You can stimulate interest and students get all of that contextual information that's missing from a traditional textbook. And the language is contextualized. So especially if it's something like the Seinfeld, for example, you know that George is always going to do something annoying, right? And the more you watch the show, the more familiar you become with the characters and their idiosyncratic patterns. So you can interpret that information. It's not as decontextualized as, for example, a dialogue in a textbook. Speaker A, speaker B, who are these people? How long have they known each other? Who's more powerful? Does B have a family? All of these things that you don't know from a textbook dialogue. The challenges, I think, are finding audience-appropriate material. And just like finding any other kind of material, finding the appropriate material takes a long time. Right? You've got to watch thousands of YouTube clips before you find exactly the right one. But when you do, I think it's like that can be a gem, right? And I actually ask my students when I teach this course on cross-cultural pragmatics each year to find some cultural audiovisual material, so it can be from a television program or from a movie, that focuses on a particular function of language, so the thinking, the greeting, the complimenting, and then we share it. So they find the material, they develop a lesson around it or some kind of activity using the material, and when I collect them all and I post them all online in our shared classroom space so that each teacher in the class can benefit from those hours spent searching that everybody else did. And that way we create a library, and I'll share some of these wonderful resources with you. Then there's the question of the authentic language. Is the language real, right? Are there some cases where you watch something like a movie and you feel that's a terrible script? I don't know what that screenwriter was thinking. People don't talk like that. And maybe because we're familiar with language. Language is our business. We understand how language works. Maybe perhaps we're more sensitive to some of that inauthentic sounding dialogue. But I think the example that I gave of my friend Paolo's work with friends, a lot of it is pretty real. And there are things that we can talk about. Is this how people actually interact, do you think? How would we change this? Okay. Now I'm going to put you on the spot, okay? So we're going to go through an exercise where you have to imagine that you're in this situation, and I'd like you to think about what you would say. So the scenario is that it's your birthday, and your friend has spent a long time picking out a very special gift for you. And you're unwrapping the box. She's really excited. I knew this was the perfect thing. I know that you're going to love it. I can't wait for you to put it on. You open the box, and it's like you recognize the brand. It's from a really nice store, but it's the ugliest sweater you've ever seen, and there's no way that you could possibly ever wear it. Like, it's just the opposite of your style as you can imagine. So there are moments in which sometimes we say things that are inaccurate, in Gricean terms, if you're familiar with Grice, violating the maxim of truthfulness, right, in order to be able to interact in that social situation in a way that will preserve the relationship. So the white lie comes in useful in that case. I have an example of a situation comedy in which something similar happened. And this is from the Mary Tyler Moore Show. This is a very old, classic sort of North American television, and I remember it from growing up. And what I like about it is, again, that discussion about what's appropriate and not. It's clean. There's not, in this case, there is no sexual innuendo. There's not a lot of cultural baggage, like Philip said, that you have to explain. Well, in the 1960s, this thing happened, and then the political system changed, and all this other stuff to understand it. I think it's pretty good example because you have some of those features of the facial expression, the intonation. So pay attention to those and see if you can pick those out. You also have the laugh track. The laugh track on the old sitcoms, and that alerts learners that there's something going on. And Washburn, in that article about using situation comedies, says that students don't need to understand the humor. And in fact, humor is also very culturally bound, as we all know too, right? So it's okay if students don't get why it's funny, but the laugh sort of tells them, okay, something's happening, that maybe things aren't 100% correct. And laughter also is useful because sometimes when people do something the wrong way in situation comedies, in other words, they do things that are inappropriate, that's when the laughter comes in. It's funny because it's against our expectations, right? So students can use the laughter as a cue to tell them, oh, wait a minute, there's something here that's not quite right. And that's another thing that our textbooks are missing. Textbooks don't tell us what not to do.